Hello everyone, this is John from Western Maine Defensive Tactics. We're going to continue on with our series on handguns for carry and talk about revolvers today. Now, revolvers might not be your first choice for a carry gun these days with the plethora of reliable semi-automatic handguns with greater capacity and better ergonomics. But that doesn't mean a revolver is completely useless. At one time, the revolver was the dominant handgun technology on the planet. Just because it's been surpassed doesn't mean it's completely useless. Now, I'm not saying we automatically revert that back to flintlock technology because that's not completely useless. But I'm saying let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because revolvers are useful within their certain niche. You can have revolvers chambered for calibers that an automatic pistol would be very impractical in, like 50 Smith & Wesson, or 500 Smith & Wesson, or 50 A&E, things like that. Yes, there are 44 Magnum and 357 automatic pistols, but they generally are not as ergonomic or as easy to handle as a good 44 revolver, things like that. I've owned a Desert Eagle, and I found my Red Hawk a lot more convenient to actually carry and shoot. Revolvers also save your brass for reloading, and I think over the long haul that could have a real advantage over an automatic pistol. They're good for contact shots. They don't get taken out of battery. As long as you keep clothing and other debris out of the barrel cylinder gap and the hammer and the action, you can do all the contact shots you'd like. Also useful for as an impact weapon, though you can use a steel frame automatic for that. A lot of the polymer frames lack a little bit to leave a little bit to be desired in that effect, but they'll still work at a pinch. But man, a gun like that makes a great impact weapon when it comes down to it. But before you carry a revolver on the street, in my opinion, there's a couple of things you need to do. You need to make sure you have a good handle on, if not master, double action shooting. You see a lot of people that will go to the range and shoot almost everything with a double action revolver, single action, because it's easier. I've even had people tell me that the gun is more accurate, quote unquote, when you shoot it single action. Well, the gun's mechanical accuracy doesn't change when it's single action. It's just the trigger pull. So the issue is not the gun. The issue is the person behind it and their trigger control. But master your double action shooting. Get a very good handle on it. Be able to hit targets easily at 25 yards and out to 50. Now, if you're talking about long distance handgunning, I like to do that because it tests your skills and sometimes it's useful. You can sneak in that little single action pull, and that's very, very useful. It's a nice option to have, but don't rely on it as a crutch. You should do 95% of your shooting with a double action revolver, double action. There's also a couple of different ways to do it. Some people like to stage the trigger, meaning they'll put their sights on target, line them up, and then roll the cylinder. And just before that hammer drops, they'll stop and refine their sight picture again, and then pull the rest of the trigger stroke through. I don't do that. I like to just put my front sight right on what I want to hit and just pull straight through and concentrate on a smooth pull, just like you do with an automatic pistol. Try each one and see which one works for you. The second thing you need to do is master the reload. You have 5 or 6 shots. I don't own any of the 7 or 8 shot revolvers, but you still have some limited capacity in comparison with an automatic pistol. And if you want to, quote unquote, keep up with an automatic pistol shooter, you're going to have to work very hard to do it, and you probably won't succeed. If you're of my vintage, you were probably taught a revolver reload that is similar to this, sometimes referred to as the FBI reload. You're shooting and you realize you need to reload. You bring the weapon back into retention position, you open the cylinder, securing it between your middle 2 fingers and your thumb. You eject the brass with your thumb, you introduce your speed loader, load, and get back to work. That works fine when you're using a 357 with 38 loads that aren't real heavy. But if you really shoot this gun like you mean it, you're out on the range and really putting some 357 rounds through it, you'll find that as your chambers get sooty, depending on the gun, you might not have the leverage here to fully eject all those rounds. You might need to revert to something like this. With that in mind, I highly recommend you look up Masada U's LFI revolver reload on YouTube. He's got about a 15-minute video on it that explains the details of the hows and whys of why he developed this reload, and it's an excellent reloading technique. I haven't worked with it only for a few months now, but I'll just demonstrate it real quick. But definitely look up Masad's video to get the details of it. And okay, you're shooting. You're empty. You need to reload. Bring the gun back in the retention position. open up your cylinder. Make your hand into an L. Run that down the barrel and eject. Grasp the gun, turn the gun muzzle downward, and then introduce your speed loader. This is a variety of things. And make sure that you swiftly and surely eject that brass so you don't get a cartridge under extractor malfunction. And it lets you reload with your right hand. But work on that reload a little bit. It's pretty nice. See which one works for you. Since we're talking about reloading, and reloading is pretty crucial with a revolver, let's talk about speed loaders. Now, when I was carrying my Red Hawk, I swore by HKS speed loaders. I tried a few other types at the time, and these were the best I found. How you use these is you, again, empty your revolver. You introduce your speed loader by lining up the cylinders, or lining up the rounds of the cylinders, turning it clockwise, whoop, and loading your gun. You get back to work. They're not too bad. They reload very easily. There's a small star in there that's actuated by the knob, and the points of the star engage the rims of the cases, and they hold them in there. There's another speed loader out there I've acquired fairly recently. This is the Safariland Comp 2, and these are actually pretty good speed loaders. I like these. You empty your gun, introduce your speed loader, and you grasp it by the body. Don't try to hold it by the knob, by the body, and just shove it in. And I kind of like those. They're a little quicker. Though they have a disadvantage in some people's eyes, these are all plastic except for the spring that's in there. And they don't load quite so easily for some people. I didn't find that problem. But once you read the directions and experiment with it a little bit, it's no problem. These are actually ruggeder than I thought they would be. I've kicked them around the range and stepped on them, and they're good to go. Another thing you can do is use the speed strips or tough strips, depending on what product you get. This is a little trick. This is an 8-shot tough strip. I've loaded 6 rounds into. I got this trick from Grant Cunningham's book. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you load 2, strip it off. Load 2, strip it off. Load 2, strip it off. And you're loaded. Not too shabby. But those are some of your ammo carry options. Now, you'll find that you're not going to carry the same amount of rounds as easily as you would with an automatic pistol. That's because of basically the magazine is a very efficient way to carry rounds. I have 20 rounds of 10mm in here, and it's one reload away from being in my gun. And that's just the reality of a revolver versus automatic. It's just not quite as efficient, but that doesn't mean it's useless. With that said, make sure you carry sufficient backup ammunition. A couple of speed loaders, a couple of speed strips. How much other ammunition do you think you're going to need? Plus a little extra. I've always erred on the side of carrying more ammunition because when I carried a revolver regularly, I found I ran out of ammunition fairly often if I only carried 24 or 36 rounds, something like that. I like to err on the side of having more ammo than I really need. One of my side projects is making a pocket ammo wallet with a bunch of loops in it that I can hang around my neck. I can fold it up, put it in my pocket, and when I need it, pull it out, hang it around my neck, and reload from the loops. But that's a side project. Okay, moving along. You understand speed loaders, you understand strips. You realize you need to carry more than what's in the weapon and more than just a few reloads. Make sure you have a decent amount of ammo. Okay, let's talk about maintenance and reliability. I'm going to use my Security 6 for this. Now, some people have said for years that with a revolver, you get 6 for sure. That they're intrinsically more reliable than an automatic pistol. And sometimes and I've heard people say that they require less maintenance. These things aren't necessarily true. Because given the state of a modern automatic pistol like the Glocks are very, very reliable. And I think most of your revolvers would be hard-pressed to put up with the conditions that the Glock can be reliable through and produce the same reliability. That's a sad fact. I like revolvers, I really do, but there are some limitations in the design. But let's talk about what can go wrong. From the muzzle backwards, going back here, this is the ejector rod. It screws in with a left-handed thread, and on this particular Ruger and on the Smith and the Taurus and a few other revolvers, I'm sure, it serves as a secondary point of lockup for the cylinder. What can happen with this rod is, under recoil, the rod can unscrew, making itself a few thousandths of an inch longer inside the gun. That makes it difficult or impossible to eject this cylinder, to open the cylinder and reload. That's a problem. Other problems Also can be crud building up on the front of your cylinder or on the rear of your barrel. There's a small gap called the BC gap, or the barrel cylinder gap, right here. It's only a few thousandths of an inch, and if you let debris build up on the front of your gun, whether it's from carry or from shooting, it can make that cylinder drag on the rear of the barrel, making your trigger pull very heavy or making your trigger impossible to pull. Moving on to the front of the cylinder, if crud or firing debris or carry crud gets built up underneath your ejector star, it can make it stand just a little bit proud of the cylinder, thus locking it up in the gun, kind of similar to the malfunction with the ejector rod. You could also have a high primer. You could also have bullet pull, that sort of thing. Now, basically, how you avoid all those problems is by good maintenance. If you're carrying a gun seriously for self-defense, every day or often, once a week or even more often, depending on your environment, unload the gun and just give it a once-over. Give it a good cleaning, and make sure your ejector rod is tight. If it's a chronic problem with your gun, if you notice that it's almost always loose when you check it, take the rod out, degrease the threads, just put a drop of Loctite on there. You don't need to flood the threads. And put it back in and snug it up with your fingers. You don't need to get crazy with vice grips and mar up the end of your rod. Just make sure it's good and tight. And then check it every week. Every week. Whether you fired the gun or not, make sure you scrub the front of your cylinder, the rear of your barrel. Make sure you scrub underneath the ejector star and where the ejector star seats into the cylinder. Make sure you scrub the top of the ejector star. Make sure you scrub where your recoil shield is. Punch the bore, clean your cylinders or your chambers, and you're pretty much done. That's going to take you maybe 10 minutes. And your revolver is going to be pretty much good to go. As long as you choose good ammunition. You might have problems with bullet pull. Bullet pull happens mostly with the lighter, smaller guns that are scandium or aluminum frame. You choose good ammunition and test it well. As long as you've chosen, again, initial quality, you're going to be good to go. And when I get a new revolver, what I like to do is I do the same process that I do with the automatics. I don't trust it. I take it to the range and I shoot it in earnest. I shoot it, reload it as fast as I can, and shoot it again and again and again until I've gone through a couple of hundred rounds. Heat the gun up. Make it work for its supper. And during that process, any flaws or manufacturing defects will quickly come to the fore and create problems. And then when you solve those problems, go through the process again. Now the Rugers pretty much can take that treatment all day long. That's one of the reasons I prefer the Ruger. But go through that shakedown process with your carry gun. Don't assume that just because it's a revolver and you can take it out and put 24 rounds through it, 4 or 5 cylinders worth, that is reliable and good to go. Shoot it hard, make it work. Heat that gun up and make damn sure it's reliable. That way you can trust it. Okay, moving right along. As long as you do your maintenance, you can have a nice, reliable weapon. Not saying that the revolver needs any less maintenance than an automatic pistol. It's the same. You have to maintain the automatic. You have to maintain the revolver. Neither weapon can be trusted if you neglect it. Okay, now talking about specific revolvers, I highly recommend and highly prefer the Rugers, obviously, because it has the modular construction that is easy for me to take down, clean, and work on if I need to. And they're built very, very rugged. The triggers aren't quite as good as, say, the Smith & Wesson right out of the box, but they're also very conducive to intelligent gunsmithing, as long as you do research and don't half-ass things. Get the right tools. Know what you're doing before you do it. Don't just experiment with it. Remember, this is a weapon you're going to trust your life to, not a range toy. All right, I also like the cylinder release on the Rugers much better than I do that of the Smith or the Taurus, or the Colt. I really like the cylinder release on it. I've actually had the cylinder release on a Smith fall off on me in the winter. That's not good. I've never had any trouble with the cylinder release on the Rugers. Okay, let's talk about references for revolvers. Now, you already know that I recommend getting some kind of a manual, whether it's a Neuhausen or other manual, on your specific gun and learning everything you can about it. This has been out for several years. It's a pretty good manual. It covers mostly the 6 series for Rugers, but it does mention the GP100 and the SB101, as well as the Red Hawk. It's not too bad. For general revolver references, you can't really go wrong with No Second Place Winner by Bill Jordan or Ed McGivern's Fast and Fancy Revolver Shooting. What you will find is these two books, well, they were written quite a while ago. Back, like I said, when revolvers ruled the world. When they were the go-to weapon for the police and the military and everybody else. They're a little bit dated. But if you're going to buy one book on revolvers, I highly recommend the Gun Digest Book of the Revolver by Grant Cunningham. This is an outstanding book. There are a lot of things I knew and a lot of things I didn't in this book. Mr. Cunningham has a really good attitude about the revolver as far as being realistic about its capacity, its reliability, and how to make the most of its strengths while minimizing its weaknesses. I really enjoyed the book. You'll get a lot from it. So definitely pick that one up. That's well worth it. Okay, let's recap real quick. Revolvers may not be your first choice. They do have limited capacity. Sometimes beginning shooters find double-action revolvers harder to shoot in double action than they will, let's say, like a Glock 19 or something like that. That's just reality. You can get by or get past that if you spend the time. Master that double-action shooting. Master the reload. Carry sufficient ammo for the task that you're doing, as well as, maybe some emergency ammo. You don't have the capacity on board that an automatic pistol has, so you need to work out how to carry those extra rounds and get very good at getting the empty brass out of the gun and getting the fresh rounds in there. If you do that, and again, choose initial quality and give it a hard ringing out initially, I think you're going to do fine in any situation you face with a revolver. Again, revolvers aren't dead. They may not be your first choice. I've said that a couple of times. But at the same time, if you like a revolver, if you enjoy revolvers, there's no reason not to carry one. You don't have to justify your carry to anybody else. And I thoroughly enjoy shooting, carrying, and using all my revolvers. While my Glocks are treated as tools, these I love. When I'm done shooting my Glocks, I clean them, reload them, put them back in the holster, and they stand ready to defend me. After I shoot my revolvers, I clean them, and then I'll probably sit around and fondle it for a little while, do a bunch of dry firing. Just handle it, practice the reloads, just because it's fun. It's satisfying to use a nicely machined piece of steel, and that's a good thing. But enjoy your revolvers. Get out there and shoot them. And realize that it's not the weapon in the fight, it's you. Granted, as warriors, we should choose the best weapons available, but sometimes, for whatever reason, we can't. And nobody's saying the revolvers aren't useful, aren't good. Many deadly men throughout the world still rely on the revolver because it's what they know, it's what they're used to. But, all right, I hope this helps you out. You take care. Bye.